Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Saeed, and this is the Humanist Foundation. The topic today is recovery from religion, RFR. We listen to people about their experience and what the religion caused of trauma. We have today two leaders of recovery from religion in New York City, Wayne Smith and Vincent Downing. And we have a special guest today, Cole. Would like to hear from each one how his experience and why he came to recovery from religion. We can start with Wayne.
Hello, I am Wayne, and I've been involved with recovering from religion for close to 2 years now. I discovered it because I was looking for something online to support a deconstruction. I heard this word, that there are deconstruction groups of people who are questioning their religious beliefs or moving away from religion. I had been watching videos from the Austin, Texas atheist community, had heard about them mentioning an organization called Recovering from Religion. So I went to their website to see if maybe there was somebody there that could recommend a group. Then I found out that they had a whole calendar of online groups. And I started joining these Zoom groups, and I just really got a lot out of attending these Zoom meetings. And what I found is people with similar backgrounds. One of the things that I have experienced in my religious past is being a member of a cult. I was a member of a cult called ICOC, which is International Churches of Christ. I was a member of that when I was in my early 20s for about 2.5 years, and joining the Recovering from Religion groups, I met people that were members of that cult and also other cults. It's been a supportive way to talk about those things in a context where people understand what that experience is like, and people who are also trying to heal and move away from those kind of experiences. Not only that, is that personally I've been just moved away from Christianity and moved away from religion, but it's been a process. It hasn't been one whole thing, but yeah, I want to give a short version of this story. So I was a Christian, but not very practicing when I was growing up. Then I joined this cult for about 2.5 years. What got me out of the cult is also what got me out of Christianity in general, got me questioning religion in general, is traveling, because I was in the Navy, and I traveled to a lot of different countries. And traveling a lot of different countries, I experienced different cultures with religious beliefs very different than mine. For example, we went to Indonesia and Singapore and Thailand and Sri Lanka, a lot of countries in the Middle East. And I got to experience culture and religion from a different point of view. And it helped me to understand that my religious beliefs were largely a product of the culture that I was in. And that was like stepping out of a smaller box into a larger worldview, where I just understood that there are many religions in the world, there are many cultures in the world. I just took the perspective that there's not one true religion or one true culture. These are variations of human culture, and ultimately that's what led me to start deconstructing and questioning things. And that's ultimately what brought me to that recovering from religion.
Thank you, Wayne, for sharing your experience about religion and why you came to recovery from religion. Go to the next guest, Vincent, if you would like to share.
I grew up with the New York City Catholics, a lifelong New Yorker, and was pretty much surrounded by people who believed this stuff from childhood onward. And I have no memory of ever believing in any of the supernatural claims of the Catholic religion. I also have no memory of believing in the boogeyman the Tooth Fairy, or the Easter Bunny, and Santa Claus, or God, for that matter. And I generally think at this point that God is basically just Santa Claus for grown-ups. Ran into recovery from religion. A friend of mine told me about it. Oh, this was around the time of the pandemic, I think. And I started off being a phone counselor, but that really didn't work very well for me. So I went into becoming a support group leader, which I did online. For example, there's an LGBT support group, there's a men's support group. So we do have support groups specific to subgroups of people. And I was helping that in that work for, that was a few years there, like 3-4 years, off and on. And it was just tremendous because this was one of the only times in my life that I was in the company of people who were absolutely dedicated, devoted to, and serious about their philosophy of life. In fact, that is what, almost without exception, what brought them to recovering from religion, because they were not content with the dogmas, or if you prefer, the package that they were given from childhood onward. And so a lot of these people in these support groups were the youth pastor and the deacon and the leaders in their organizations. And a lot of them became disenchanted with their religion as the result of having researched it and really looking into it. That is a very common refrain that we hear from people, that the more they read the Bible, the more this seemed like more or less utter nonsense to them. And yes, indeed, I'll say it right here and now, I think Christianity is pretty much utter nonsense, aside from some of the ethical constraints that are in it that are common to all religions, like lying is not good and murdering each other is not good. But I do not think that the Catholics invented these things as they more or less claim to. It also took me a long time to understand how poisonous so many of the assumptions were that surrounded the Catholicism of the time. For example, the Catholic Church was, and as far as I can tell, is in performative, the traditional gender role models. And I found that what I was told what a man was absolutely so poisonous. It was radioactive. For example, I did not want to be terrified of and unaware of all of my emotions except for rage. Did not want to be contemptuous of intellectual pursuits or my desire to think about and talk about stuff other than sports and cars, which in my grammar school there was absolutely nothing else that a real boy would ever talk about or think of. And finally, I wanted to be creative and respect creativity. And also I did not think that girls and women were inherently inferior to me, which is what the Catholic Church and these other patriarchal institutions are unremittingly force-feeding all of us every step of the way. So in that sense, my deconstruction began during childhood, accelerated during adolescence, when I realized I was bisexual, and that the utterly mind-bogglingly intense, hysterical hatred that these boys in my high school had towards anything feminine, anything queer, was just so... It was insane. And I'm not being colorful, or that is not a metaphor. I consider now, in retrospect, what these people were suffering from was a species of cultivated insanity, as I believe religion is a cultivated. It's a cultivated addiction. They cause the sickness, and they have the only cure. In the case of Christianity, you are this filthy, sinful, criminal creature, and of course, the only cure is being dependent on our clergy, who are going to bring you to Jesus Christ. Which I don't know. I just never believed it, and also was a little bit suspicious of these people who are spending so much time telling me how much I owed somebody that I never even met. That never kind of set well with me, even as a young teenager. So when I bumbled into recovery from religion, this was revelatory to me. I was now in the company of people who had paid such inconceivable prices just to be in that silly little Zoom room with me. It was humbling. It was mind expanding. It was eye opening. I certainly learned a lot less self-pity, if not self-absorption, and feel nothing less than privileged to be in the company of people who are willing to pay such a steep price for something as diaphanous as authenticity or freedom. A lot of folks, it seems to me, don't even understand that they have sold their birthright for far less than a bowl of porridge, a drum roll that is actually a biblical illusion. About a year and a half ago, one of the volunteer coordinators at Recovery from Religion told me that, hey, we've got a New Yorker who is willing to start an in-person group if you are. And immediately I went for it because I knew, and this was Wayne. Immediately I went for this because I knew I wasn't willing to undertake that kind of responsibility on my own. But if somebody else was in on it with me, I'd gladly start an in-person support group. And we've been doing wonderfully. We have a very involved core group of people who are still as dedicated to the work of not only deconstruction, but reconstruction. Because after you've deconstructed this false thing and unlearned all of these poisonous things that have been foisted on you, then your work is only beginning. Now you've got to actually positively construct who it is, what your community is, where you're going to find these people. So that we can help people with this process. And many of these meetings just feeling like I'm floating. I feel like I've actually accomplished something of primal, fundamental worth for other people, and that's just endlessly rewarding for me. And I guess that brings us to today. So I cede the floor to Cole.
Yeah.
So I do want to make something clear. Clearly, it's Wayne and Vincent that are the leaders in this. I've done jack shit. I'm just here. But so I started this kind of journey, I would say, frankly, almost at this point, almost a decade ago. So I have a slightly different background than a lot of people in the room. I was a former Pentecostal. So Pentecostalism, for if you haven't heard, is very kind of an emotional type Christianity. It's very extreme. It's very conservative, so to speak. And it, again, relies on a lot of emotion. So you are speaking in tongues, which sounds very grand and nice, but is really just babbling to yourself and to the rest of the church. And then there's an emphasis on healing. So if you have an ailment, you'll come up to the front of the altar and people will lay their hands on you and you'll be healed, which normally lasts about a day. And then, you're back to your ailment. And then again, I stress it is just all very emotional. The preaching from the preacher is a lot of hellfire. My specific denomination focused a lot on the end times. So the world is coming to an end. Jesus is coming back. Be ready, be ready, be ready. We're all sinners. Be ready. So you can imagine that growing up as a child and hearing that the world is going to end, and not necessarily even thinking that you were going to make it to your adulthood because Jesus is going to come back. Yay. So the world's going to end. How great. So I had started kind of this deconstruction, reconstruction process, as Vincent put it, because I frankly was a little forced to. So I went to college, and actually a little bit before college, I had started kind of questioning a lot. So, for example, my denomination did not believe in evolution. It did not believe in the Big Bang. A lot of kind of core scientific beliefs were ones that I didn't necessarily hold. But at a certain point, you have a hard time not believing in those, in school, in popular culture, all of that. So I started to question specifically things like evolution and the Big Bang became kind of undeniable realities. So I had started to let go of some of that. And then ultimately I was dealing with a separate thing, which was the fact that I was attracted to men. And in Pentecostalism, that is the sin above all sins, aside from like drinking, which is a sin, gambling is a sin, but liking men is certainly a very big sin. So that was something that I had struggled with for I mean, frankly, my entire life, is trying to reconcile that with the fact that I considered myself a good Christian, but I had this terrible, terrible secret, which was the fact that I was attracted to men. This kind of came to head when I had gone to college and my family had found out that I had gotten a boyfriend, and my life kind of fell apart. Everything that I knew about my church, about my family, turned itself upside down. And I had lost, frankly, my entire worldview and had to start over. I held on to kind of a moderate version of Christianity. And then ultimately, after graduation, moving out, etc., I had lost a lot of contact with my family. And ultimately, after, like Vincent mentioned and Wayne mentioned, you read the Bible enough, you might just let go of your beliefs. That's what I did. I read the history of the Bible in addition to the Bible itself. And I found that the foundation of how the Bible was created was something that I just couldn't believe in. Why would a perfect God provide an imperfect book to people that he wants so desperately to save? So I noticed in my life that even though it was going pretty fine, I still had a lot of issues doing things like going to buy alcohol because it was always a sin. I would get very nervous and going to just to an alcohol store, a liquor store. And that's when I was like, I need to deal with this because this is not normal. This is not something that I want to live with in my life. So I was listening again to the atheist community of Austin. They had mentioned this recovering for religion, and I joined a virtual support group in Richmond, Virginia, because that's where I was living at the time. And I just remember the first time I said something that was very specific to Pentecostalism, like things like speaking in tongues, that if you say to the general population, a lot of times they don't, especially Catholics, they wouldn't know what I'm talking about. Any other denomination of moderate Christianity would not know. And so it was hard to get that support. But I remember someone knew what I was talking about in recovering from religion. I just remember, like, I can talk about this. I can talk about the guilt that this religion instilled in me. I can talk about the things like the faith healing and the stuff that I never could discuss with someone, even people close to me who didn't understand. And that's when I was very committed to staying and recovering from religion, because all the different backgrounds, I think, share a lot of fundamentally similar things like guilt, or things like the price, like Vincent mentioned, that you pay to get out of it. And some of the dynamics with family or with your gender, masculinity, that type of stuff is very similar, even with backgrounds that are very, very different. So I found that that was just extremely helpful to me. And when I moved to New York, I met you lovely people and joined the in-person group, which I love in person much better, and had a similar experience that I could talk about things that no one else would really understand and get that kind of support. So yeah, now I'm here today again with these lovely people, and I will turn it back over to Saeed.
Oh, thank you for getting your story. That's really interesting. I would like to share my own story. I'm Saeed. I born in Saudi Arabia. I questioned Islam for a long time, probably exactly the same thing like what Vincent said, called that if you read the Bible, you can understand and you're going to leave that religion. That's exactly what's happened to me when I read the Quran and the history of the Quran and how Muhammad wrote the Quran and how he started Islam as a religion. That doesn't make sense because a lot of people who believe in different religion and there is different domination of Islam, like Shia in Iran, Iraq, Yemen now, Sunni in Saudi Arabia, other country around Saudi Arabia like Bahrain, Kuwait, and part of Syria, part of Lebanon, part of other different countries like Indonesia too as well. And I went to Mecca many times, and I asked those people who doesn't speak Arabic but they believe in Islam what they do know about Islam and how they do understand the Quran. And I also connect that to the people who understood the Quran a long time ago with this 4 different domination under Sunni way to believe in Islam, like Maliki and Shafi'i and Hanbali and Hanafi. So there is a different way to believe in the Sunni way, and also there is a different way to believe in Shia way too. It's chaos, and what Muhammad actually focused in the Quran about who are responsible to betray those prophets which God sent it to the Jews first of all, and they betrayed those prophets. They say to God that we want more, and we start like there's a lot of story here and there. And then when I said like I saw the Holocaust, I said, are those people really responsible to what Muhammad described the Jews in the Quran, how they behave or treat God at that time? That doesn't make sense. And I was really scared at the beginning to speak my mind, to tell everyone. But I questioned also the religious leader over there about how they understood the Islam in general. So they didn't think for once, for a second. They just repeat what exists in the book. And then when I went to Mecca also, so the religious leader over there, he just talked about how the leader is wonderful and what all people should listen to the leader. And probably they are politicize, what they call that, politicize the religion. So that was very clear. And I said to myself that if I have a chance to leave this country and go to other countries so I can feel safe about myself. So when I came to the United States, I met a wonderful lady in Brooklyn, and she introduced me to Charles Darwin. Since that time, I started to read about evolution. And I already left Islam. So when I read Origin of Species for Charles Darwin, opened my eyes. I was so scared, a little bit not ready to receive all this information, knowledge about who we are, about our existence. And not only about, Charles Darwin doesn't talk about also evolution. It's a lot of information. You can talk about biogeography. You can talk about biology. You can talk about other different things, connect to each other. And now we understand much more than what Charles Darwin discovered. As you mentioned, Cole, earlier about also Big Bang. There's a lot of things that you cannot deny. This is a fact. But we have also these things like since 100, probably 20 years, since Charles Darwin published his book. But those religions actually much more older than evolution. So we still probably processing this information, how we deliver this knowledge to Homo sapien, let them understand what's going on around the world. And that's what we deal actually at Recovery from Religion. And I'm glad that we are here meeting also wonderful people at Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture, which the first time I went to Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture, I met Vincent there, and he introduced me to other different books and people over there, and he introduced me also to Recovery from Religion. Yeah, this is what I want to share. Thank you. What do you want to tell about your experience at Recovery from Religion, the people that came to Recovery from Religion, and everyone tell his story? What do you witness and experience? Vincent and Wayne.
I'd like to point something out, and Cole, you mentioned this when you talked about the guilt that religion instills, and hearing the stories, hearing everybody's stories, in thinking about what happens in the recovering from religion rooms is that we have conversations where we really expose and talk freely about the guilt, the shame, the fear that religion has used to control us. And it's interesting because even people who come from different versions of the same religion or completely different religions, there's a similar pattern that happens when we're indoctrinated, especially growing up as children, and the things that we're told, whether it's about hell or whether it's fear of being cast out of the group. There's all kinds of patterns that are used, and it's one of the powerful experiences I've had in recovering from religion is when people will share certain experiences they've had, and it's like, yes, me too. That happened also. And I used to be afraid of that, and I used to worry about this, and my church used to tell me the same thing, that like, for example, I remember a church leader saying, reading a Bible verse that said slaves should obey their masters. It was telling me that basically I should consider myself a slave to the situation I was in, and not make waves or whatever, or just being afraid that I would go to hell because of sexuality, or because of I didn't believe enough. That was even more, sexuality was a huge thing that to feel ashamed about, but also just not believing enough. If you weren't 1000% committed to God, which meant being committed to this church, then you were in danger of going to hell forever, and just being. It's pretty insane now when I think about it, but when we have these conversations in the recovering from religion groups, and we really have this moment where somebody's talking and everyone else identifying with it so much, and there's a relief there. We realize that this is a very human experience that we had, and it's kind of a beautiful thing to see a group of people coming together and just taking that courageous step of moving away from all of that. And that's just what I wanted to share.
The recurring theme, just to expand a little bit on what you were saying to me, is freedom. Is that the people who come to these groups are fighting for freedom. These are freedom fighters. They don't want to be slaves to a dogma. They don't want to be slaves to a community. They want to live their authentic lives. And I don't think it's a surprise that we're finding that there are common themes across these various thought systems, because they are built to control and contain human beings. And the human psyche is going to be pretty similar from continent to continent, so that there are going to be similar things that are used to control and contain us. In shorthand, the way I think of it is religion is a container. It's not there for freedom. That's not its purpose. It's there to tell us what to think, as opposed to, and I'm aware this is something of an oversimplification, as opposed to philosophy, which my experience of philosophy is that the purpose of philosophy is to teach you how to think. And you have to know how to think if you're going to be free. There's no chance. You've got no chance of freedom if you don't know how to think. And that includes critical thinking. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to think for yourself. You're always going to be at the whim of some emotion and some diaphanous perception of the moment. To me, things like critical thinking, logic, these things are an anchor. Or as I like to put it, I'd rather have an uncertainty that I could be certain of than a certainty that I'm uncertain of.
Yeah. Thank you, Vincent, for sharing this too as well. But the big question is, religion to a lot of people is a foundation. It's not just a religion, it's a culture, it's a holidays, it's a history, it's the way how they view themselves and view the world. They programmed this way for a long time. In some countries it says it's a law. So this is what we call a theocracy. They push you to believe in a certain way. If you don't, you're going to face consequences from the people who believe in the same religion, and also from the government, which they force people to believe same way. So in a free world, like in the United States, so how we can replace religion is not just like we take people outside from religion, but that's what we don't do. People already live their own faith, but they are open to replace this thing, to change the foundation, to view themselves differently and view the world also.
So I think for me, I never, and I was also very resistant to the fact that I did need to replace it. I don't want to replace what I had. I want to exercise, to Vincent's point, the human freedom that I have now to make my own choices, my own morality, my own path. Like, if I succeed, it was me that succeeded. If I fail, it was me that failed. Whereas what used to be was the fact that if you succeed, it's God. If you fail, it's Satan, or also maybe God too, if he wants to test you or something. So I know this isn't necessarily an answer to the question, but I think that you don't always have to replace what you had. You don't always have to replace the holidays or the type of communities. I think that you can, instead of replacing, you can construct your own type of being. So what I mean by that is that, like, you don't have to sit at, like, say, Christmas and think, oh, what do I need to do this day? It could be, well, I want to celebrate this other day. I want to do this for myself. You don't have to try to find a replacement. And that's why, for me personally, again, I've always been very resistant to going to things like a Unitarian church or anything like that, because for me, it's like, I don't want to replace having a crutch in life to feel better about things that are going on. I want to be able to deal with those, and then also not be or feel committed to some sort of even a moderate version of a belief. That's, again, not necessarily an answer to the question, but that's, again, I just think it all comes down to Vincent's point, is like it is a type of freedom that I enjoy having that I didn't have.
Oh, interesting answer. Thank you.
Replace isn't a good word. We all still want community,
Yeah.
for example, and I don't think of finding a group of humanists, in my case, to hang out with. I don't think of that as replacing Catholicism with humanism. And also, I like. I've constructed my own philosophy out of snagging bits and pieces out of other philosophies, and reassembling them into something that suits me personally, that is helping me in my quest for freedom. And you could think of that as replacing Catholicism with this other thing, but I do want a philosophy. I don't want to be a nihilist and believe in nothing. If you're going to leave a community and find something else with all the same problems and that's set up to imprison you, I would call that replacement.
Yeah.
I'm quibbling, I'm being pedantic about the word. I just don't think that that's what anybody that I've met in RFR, certainly I don't think that that's what anybody, including you, at this table is doing anything of the kind.
Yeah, I think that just the word replace has always sometimes gotten me. It's like a replacement for some of the things that I had. But yeah, I absolutely believe that humans have a need for, like, a social need. So finding your own kind of way to make that, I think, is never, which again we've done here. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting question. There are certain things that people are going to do whether there's religion involved or not, and religion does some of those things. And then there are certain things that that are very clearly done better in the secular community than it is done in the religious community, but the religion tries to do it also. Rock music, for example. You're trying to do Christian rock music, it's just going to not be as good as secular rock music. Universities is another thing. You're trying to go to a Christian university, you're not going to get a good education as if you go to a secular university. So I'm just extrapolating that. There's community in general. One of the things I do is I watch people who grew up without a religious indoctrination, and whole communities of especially younger people whose parents were mature enough to not indoctrinate their kids into religion, and watch how they move through the world, and it's like they're not missing anything.
I like that.
They have communities.
Yeah.
They have hobbies. They have passions. They have rituals amongst themselves to celebrate. And as some groups of friends, they might celebrate seasons by being into different sports at different times of year. They might really be into going and doing different outdoor activities. They might be there's all kinds of secular communities, whether it's people who are into a certain kind of music or a certain activity, a certain hobby, a certain fandom. There's all these communities I see. So community is one thing that religion does, but I think the secular world does better. Education, religion does. I think the secular world does better. And even myths and storytelling, like we get all these myths in religion, and there's some really interesting and powerful stories in religion, but we have also modern storytellers that still tell stories better than those religious stories. So I don't think that when you step out of religion into the secular world, I think the overwhelming thing is there's so many options. There's so it's in the religious mindset, you kinda are really, it's a narrow kind of path, and the there are religious practices that I think that are interesting that people have taken out of the religious context to do, like yoga and meditation, even like the ritual of a Catholic mass, or the ritual of prayer, or speaking in tongues. All these things have they have secular equivalents of those kind of experiences that alter your state of consciousness and connect you to, like a lot of people in RFR have given the example of that sense of ecstasy they might have at a church, like a Pentecostal church, was super emotion. You're filled with the Holy Ghost and speaking in tongues, and you feel connected with God and with the church. And then people will go to like a rock concert for the first time, and they'll have those same feelings. And it's like, okay, it's a very common human experience that sometimes the religious institutions will just put their stamp on it and say that they're the only ones that can give you that kind of experience. So I think from my perspective, to replacing religion is just replacing it with just human culture, involvement with the secular society, and different, following my own interests and going where that leads, but also groups like Recovering from Religion, Ethical Society. A lot of people are attracted to those who are coming from a religious background, even like you mentioned, Unitarian, Universalist churches, because sometimes we do have these habits where we're used to relating with people in a certain way, and those can be helpful too, especially for those of us who are coming out of religion. But I would say I'm mostly inspired by watching younger people who are secular, who've always been secular, and just watching how they they build their own communities, they build their own value systems, and whether it's connecting with people online, or how they build networks of friends, and how they pursue their art and their interests and their hobbies. And something that I've been involved with is like the Burning Man community, and that's where people are really into radical self-expression, and there's a community there also where people have a sense of fellowship and a sense of connection and community, but it's a very secular value system where all kind of sexual expression is welcome. Ethical, consensual sexual expression is welcome, and artistic expression is welcome. And for me, that's a thing that I've found that's also another option. And when you look at the secular world, there's a lot of things that, and you mentioned freedom, so it's like it's a huge world out there. It's like the religious world is very small, but the actual world, including exploring other types of cultures and other types of religions out there too, that can be part of the journey also.
Well, freedom is scary stuff, and it's not easy. It's a lot more work being free than it is just staying on the hamster wheel that you have been assigned to. I frankly just don't see that kind of totalitarian system as, in terms of cultural evolution, it's really not working for the information age. And I know Saeed and I have discussed this more than once, that we secularists might have all of these thousands of years of momentum against us, in that these totalitarian systems have existed for some of them many thousands of years, with institutions to buttress them. But we do have one thing working in our favor, which is that we are actually, insofar as I'm able to determine, we are actually the winning a combination of cultural factors for the information age. And I say this because if you are living in a post-industrial, information-based, soon-to-be post-scarcity economic and political culture, then really what the ultimate thing of value or that you have is the human mind. So it is no longer going to be the winning thing for your culture to imprison all the minds so that everybody thinks alike, which I'm the first to concede that was probably the best way to go back before we had science and we had philosophy and we had art and we had all of these other disciplines to draw from. All there was this thing called religion. Okay, that's the best thing you got, but now it's not the best thing that humanity has anymore. And we can see this in how people are falling away from religion in multitudes across the world. Now, whether or not they're falling into things that are better than what they're falling out of is another discussion to be had. But look, unless the conservatives succeed in their bid to destroy civilization so that they can drag us all back into an environment that's more suitable for them, this is the way for the species to go, in my not at all humble opinion.
I think just one last thing on kind of the topic of transition from like a religious mindset to a more secular mindset. I think one thing that is important in that transition is recognizing like beauty. So for me, one of the scriptures that my church said a lot was like, life is like dirty rags, meaning that life it's dirty, it's bad. We're waiting for the return of Jesus Christ for things to be perfect and better. And I held on to that. And when I became, in essence, free from that mindset, I realized like the world is unbelievably beautiful. Life is beautiful. Life is worth it. Life is not dirty. It's not bad. Freedom of expression and the things that you can do is not bad. And that's when I started looking into things like space. It was just like, because I didn't have a lot of science background, and then suddenly you learn like how just infinitely small we are compared to everything. And there's a beauty in that. It's like we have this like finite time of consciousness, and you can enjoy it to the fullest extent. And for me, that was like the absolute, like what I hold on to when things are hard, when there is a price, when conservatives try to bring back the world to a certain way, is that like the world is beautiful, and that this time we have, the small time that we have to really make it worth it, much more than this mindset of we're just waiting for things to end. We're just waiting for the world to end. So yeah, just wanted to say that because I think transition-wise, for me, that's like what I hold on to, and in essence, if we want to use the term, like a replacement, sure,
Yeah.
for that old mindset that I had.
That's really a beautiful goal about what you just said, that the transition between how you used to view nature and God and yourself, and now you change all the way, totally different how you view the world and view yourself. See how much the world is beautiful, nature is very beautiful, and not exactly how they described it to you. How do you think that we can help those people who going to come over and over again to recovery from religion, to help them go through that process and view the world exactly how you view the world right now?
I think that it starts with first giving yourself some grace to understand that this is not going to be something that is necessarily easy. I had a lot of moments where, I'll just use a very specific example, I got very scared driving, and I used to pray all the time right before I drive, and it made me feel better. And so I'd drive along and be fine. And without that kind of ritual, so to speak, of prayer, I had a hard time. And I would beat myself. I'm like, why am I scared? Like, I'm fine. I don't need this. I don't need to have that prayer or whatever. And I think when I started to be like, well, it's okay. Like, I'm human. I did this for many years of my life and was a full-fledged believer in the power of prayer. It's only natural that it's going to take a little bit. And I think when you recognize that, it can help you kind of open your mind to other things and just like slowly start to, it's a step-by-step process to take away some of those old thoughts. And another thing too is, I think, questioning yourself. Just like you question to get yourself out of religion, do the same thing when you do have those more difficult times in trying to let go. So, for example, like when I would go into a liquor store and I would get all nervous to talk to the cashier to go buy vodka, I would question and be like, why? Why do I feel this way? It's just liquor. The world has been drinking liquor since the dawn of humanity. There's no reason. So it's that kind of process of just like, when you have this thought, this negative type thought, to just say, okay, why am I feeling this way? Why am I doing that? And I think, I wish I had some soaring prose on how to get to the beauty of life, but that's really how I do it, is chipping away.
Interesting. And thank you for sharing this call. I think probably the time anyone would like to share thing before we...
Just that growing up in Saudi Arabia is pretty hardcore, so good. You don't know.
I would like to mention also what Wayne said earlier, that those secular kids, they did not miss anything. They got it probably easy because their parents told them about how the life or the nature operate with each other, and they don't have to deal with all this trauma, so it's easy for them to move on and build something beautiful in this world. Education costs a lot of money, but also if you have well-educated parents, that's going to help a lot. Let your kids probably view the world different way since young age, and you don't have to deal with all this trauma. I would like to thank you guys for being here today to discuss recovery from religion, for sharing your stories, and we're going to keep this going. We're going to put the link of recoveryfromreligion.org and New York Society for Ethical Culture and Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture. Thank you, Wayne Smith, Vincent Downing, and Cole today. And
thank you, Saeed.
Oh, you're welcome. And we hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah.